So I made a huge mistake. It's been a while since the last devlog, and there are so many updates that I could be showing you, but I think it's more important to talk about the huge mistake. Just before we do though, I have to give you the regular reminder to add the game to your wishlist on Steam. This helps us indiedev so much because it lets Steam know that there are people who are interested in our game, and they'll be more likely to help spread the word when it does come out. So hit the link in the description, click the add to wishlist button, and let's get back to it. So I've been working as a software engineer for about a decade now, and in all that time of releasing software I've come to learn one thing. There's no such thing as bug-free software, especially in an alpha stage. No matter how much you test, bugs and usability issues will always arise when you give your software to others for the first time. Thankfully, this experience prepped me for the first Feral North playtest because, as I said, I made a huge mistake. You see, the very first line of code for Feral North was written on July 17th of last year, and the first playtest was July 4th of this year. That's 352 days apart, which is way too long. When you're developing a game in isolation, you can't objectively judge the game, and any developer will tell you that you have days where you think it's absolute garbage, and you have other days where you think you've created a masterpiece. Most games also go through design revisions. Some of you that may have been watching my devlogs for a while will no doubt remember this beauty. If you do, leave a comment down below with the name of the game. Ironically, the devlog which featured this game is my only video to pass 100,000 views, so if this video passes 100,000, then I'll probably have no choice but to include a playable version of this as an Easter egg somewhere in Feral North. Anyways, developing in isolation and making major design revisions can only be a recipe for disaster, because you can't be objective about your own creations. Up until this point, I've had no way of knowing if Feral North was a game that was destined to sit amongst the greats of gaming, or if it was just junk. What happened is basically that this channel started gaining an audience, which is amazing. But suddenly the pressure started to increase. I wasn't just making a little game for myself anymore, suddenly thousands of people were interested in asking when they could play. Instead of taking advantage of that and bringing playtesters into the loop early, my biggest mistake was that I spent several more months of development trying to perfect every little thing before anyone else could play it. This is a really big mistake, and honestly something that could have been a complete disaster if it turned out that the first playtesters hated the game, or if there were structural or fundamental problems to the design that would need to be addressed. So, now that there's finally been a playtest, that raises the question, what did they think? Well, they absolutely, unequivocally, unanimously had a few issues. But it seems like overall it was a good experience. The playtesters really loved the visuals, the atmosphere, and the music, and the fundamental gameplay is solid, which was the most important thing. The consensus seems to be that there's a good game in there, but there's a few rough edges to work out, so let's dig into that. So the number one criticism was completely surprising to me. I knew there would be some issues, but this one never even occurred to me, it wasn't even on my radar. And so the fact that it was enough to stop people from playing the game and was the first thing that everyone brought up was a complete shock to me. So the camera controls were an issue that every playtester raised. I'm a bit weird honestly, and I like to play with inverted camera control. And I hadn't even considered that when I sent the build out, it was set to inverted with no settings menu to change it. This is a really quick fix, and within a couple of minutes I had sent a hotfix to set the camera input to default. But there was another problem that took more time to solve. For some players, the slightest movement of the mouse sent the camera spinning, and for others the camera was way too slow, or it moved vertically when the mouse was only moved horizontally. This completely took me by surprise because on my PC and on my Mac, the camera movement was completely normal, both with a mouse and a controller. It was basically what I would expect as the defaults in any game that I play. Obviously a settings menu to adjust the sensitivity would help, but there was something more going on here because the range shouldn't be so drastic, and the defaults should be sensible on pretty much every machine. It took a bunch of digging through Unity documentation, but I eventually found that the default input mode for Cinemachine camera is essentially just making you perfect the movement for your own machine, but it can behave wildly different on other machines. Luckily it was a quick settings change just to use something called input value gain instead, which effectively normalizes the input and makes it much more predictable across computers. But still, this and a few other bits of feedback, such as the caves being too dark, told me that a settings menu was probably the top priority before sending it out to anyone else. So I spent a few days setting up the basics of the settings menu, and I added options for the camera controls and screen brightness, as well as language and quality settings, amongst others. So now the defaults have been improved, but players can still fine-tune them for their own preference. Of course, no alpha would be complete without a few bugs. Bugs are to be expected at an alpha stage, and luckily they were all pretty easy to solve and didn't show any fundamental problems in the game's design. This car crash one was pretty wild. This is actually a cutscene, and there's definitely no car crash in Farewell North, so this one really had me scratching my head. It turns out that if you pause the game repeatedly during a cutscene, it would cause NPCs to drift. This is actually an issue I found in Unity's nav mesh system, where it doesn't handle changes in timescale very well. So I simply recalculate the path each time you unpause, and now that's solved. But it was a pretty mind-blowing one the first time I saw it. Other bugs, such as the procedural animation of the girl's arms going crazy, were caused mostly by players behaving in unexpected ways. You see, the dog can bark at objects in the environment to get the girl to interact with them, and it seems from the playtest videos that I reviewed that the highlight wasn't clear enough, because a lot of players are running right up to the object before barking, thinking that they had to be basically touching it, instead of targeting them from afar, as intended. This would cause players to get in the girl's way and prevent her from getting into proper position, and then that would throw off her whole animation cycle. So I ended up approaching this in two ways. The first was to improve the highlighting and make it much more visible when you could and could not target something. This seems to have helped a lot, but more importantly, the second was to have the girl detect when the dog is in the way, and make a comment telling the dog to get out of the way. This turns a problematic situation into a charming character moment, which to me is the perfect kind of solution for this type of issue. It wasn't all negative though. I'll be honest, after a year of working on the game solo, it was really stressful to know that there were people out there who were playing the game, finding issues, scrutinizing it, but there were a lot of positives to take out of the demo as well. First, the game is on a solid foundation, technically and design-wise. There's lots of room for improvement, but I think overall at an alpha stage, it's in good shape. I've already released 3 new versions since this feedback came in, and it's been really helpful to improve the overall experience of the game. Players seem to love the music, which John and I put a lot of time and effort into to build a really robust and adaptive audio system for the game, and the atmosphere and the visuals were definitely a hit. The gameplay is coming along nicely, and it's been improved a ton from this feedback. This is kind of to be expected. With YouTube devlogs, people have been able to provide a lot of feedback on the atmosphere and the visuals and their kind of idea of the gameplay, but this is the first time that people have actually had hands-on experience with the gameplay and been able to provide direct feedback to it, and so it makes sense that the gameplay needs to catch up to the visuals a little bit. One piece I haven't really solved yet is that players are really struggling to understand the perspective puzzles, and there are a few places in the demo that players are getting lost and backtracking to see if they missed something when they don't know where to go. These are the kind of issues you're trying to root out in a playtest, and that'll be something for me to focus on over the next few weeks prior to expanding demo access. So, that takes us to the big question. When can you play? Currently we're here in the alpha stage, and the idea of the alpha is just to get a few playtesters to weed out any major issues, and that's currently in progress. As I work through this feedback, I'll need a few more players to ensure that the level design and puzzle issues have been properly solved, and for that I'll be expanding the alpha access to the most active Discord members. I'll probably bring in just a few more people each week while the alpha is polished, and after a few weeks, likely in August, move into the beta phase. Once we're in the beta phase, I'll be expanding access much more quickly, likely 20 or so new people per week, with access given somewhat randomly, but also factoring in how active the people are on Discord, YouTube, and Twitch. Finally, towards the end of the year, the demo will be public in one of the Steam festivals, so if you want to help shape the game prior to the public demo, all of this is being driven by Discord, so if you haven't already joined, then please do so. And there are plenty of other reasons to join the Discord. We recently ran a 48-hour art jam and got a really fun variety of submissions, including 2D art, 3D art, music, and even baking. The theme was Beneath the Surface, and it was a good time, and after voting we have some really impressive winners. Tied for second place we had Baby Shark and Fakugoi. Baby Shark created a really unique underwater scene in Blender, 2 characters climbing out on the top left. Fakugoi, a 3D artist from Argentina, created a brilliant scene in Unity with these stone hands reaching up to the water. Really cool stuff. And in first place, Maybe It's Moss submitted this beautiful underground scene made in 3D in Blender. They'll be holding the honorary Jam Champion role on Discord until the next jam, so if you want to try to take the role from them or join in on the alpha/beta testing of Farewell North, then make sure you join the Discord. The link's down in the description. Alright guys, that does it for this one. Don't forget to keep liking and commenting on these videos, it really helps get on the good side of the YouTube algorithm. And I hope to chat with you all in the comments and on Discord, but if not, I'll see you next time.